Good morning. Thanks for coming. Go ahead, like and subscribe if you want. I'm here to give you a little update on how the holster's going. I got it dyed in the last video. Got the tiger striping in there like I was hoping I would be able to get. It kind of washed into the rest of the color of the holster, which I think looks really cool. Very pleased with the way it turned out. See if you can get a decent look at the inside. This should do everything I need it to and maybe a little more. I went ahead and I put some buttons on. I was scared to do that right off the rip because I wanted to make sure alignment was perfect. And I mean, I don't know if you can see that or not, like I can, but that's pretty dang close to perfect, at least in my opinion. And then this would be roughly here with the under thumb protection and the rear saddle strapping. And I've already pre-aligned some holes that I'm going to show on camera. I will punch with my, I don't know, hand, awl, pick, whatever. It's very sharp. It's good for creating holes for the needle, especially since this leather is pretty thick. It's pretty dense, and it's pretty hard now. I'll grab a flappy piece of this so you can see what this was like. That cut actually comes off of this big piece of rawhide. You'll note maybe at some point you saw the numbers on the back of this. It was roughly 14 square feet of rawhide or leather, whatever. Pretty loose, pretty flappy, and honestly with the wet form it turns into this. I'm still waiting on something that'll make it a lot harder. I can't say I know exactly what's in it, but it's coming from Weaver Leather Supply. I'm pretty excited to see how much harder this gets because it's a holster, for Christ's sake. These parts will probably be left flappy. This will be left flappy. I want to be able to flex them, move them a little bit. But yeah, here in just a little bit, I'll figure out what my stitch pattern for this portion of the holster is going to be. Probably just going to be a big box. I like big box. This tends to be my favorite thread. I like the color. I think it's sweet. It comes in and out. It looks like crayons. Call it the 3-year-old or whatever brain that I have, but I think it's cool. I like the color. Plus, it's on the inside. It'll be on the belt side. You may see some of it here as well, but what's life without a little color? Anyhow, I'm gonna tell you a couple of the things that I forgot to tell you, that I missed, that I did not inform you of. I wanted to start by showing you a couple of the tools that I may not have told you that I was using. All right. So for trimming the edges of the leather, I actually have a good example here. Trimming the edges of the leather or cutting any pieces off. These right here, dude. Oh my goodness. These are Fiskars titanium non-stick. Pretty sure they're garden shears. I love them. These are great. They made cutting the burrs and furs on these inside corners a breeze, dreamy, if you will. They kind of pinch in right here at the tip too, so you can cut tiny little furs out. If you can't get them with those, again, just a quick little snappable blade razor knife. they're pretty nice. When you're processing the leather after you've beveled all your edges and stuff, I did forget to tell you, you can take off any tall standing furs and burrs with a razor blade before you use the back end of your burnishing tool to smooth this leather out. This is the burnishing tool I use for smoothing. I also do occasionally use this one for inside work, but this one's a little bit rougher. It's not quite the same as the other burnishing tool I have that is very smooth. Even this is like polished smooth. This is a little rough. But what this can do, I know you see it. It lays all those fibers down into a very smooth surface, right? And so I've done that on pretty much every surface that I could physically get to, and I did all that before I ever even wet molded this holster. Every piece of leather that I was working with has already had the ends laid flat, and then on these parts I actually did it a second time before I dyed them, because getting stuff that wet and rubbing these daubers across the surface kind of has the tendency to grab and snag a couple of the lighter, smaller ones. But this here really contributes to overall quality of life in the end of the day, because then you don't have to really work around the buttons and stuff if you do it early, especially. And then for the finished product, generally it works really good if you lay all the fibers down. Get a lot of weight on it. It's kind of like burnishing the edges. The harder you go, the longer you do it, the more polished and smooth and shiny that will be, and then the more it'll resist water, humidity, gun oils if you're using those. Since I already got this out, I can show you how I actually attach the buttons as well. This is a special tool for installing buttons. You have to have something like this. You have to use something like this to install buttons. I use my piece of hardwood floor clamped in a vise, and then for the button portion, you sit the button down into here, and then you put the second piece on over the top. In my case, it's the locking mechanism, right? It pushes through the leather, you punch the hole. That's why I was showing you the holes I pre-punched. Sorry, I wasn't centered on the workspace. But you push part 1 of the button through part 2 of the button, and then you place the inside of this nub on the inside of the tall pillar of the button, and then while holding it as perfectly level and probably plumb as possible, very gently, right? You want it to take time. You don't want to hammer this down in 1 or 2 taps. You want it to take like 10 or 15, dude. Go slow. You want to center that piece, and you want to make sure that you're not running crooked on the button, because if you look straight down the barrel, this one actually sits canted. The button's head sits like this, and the button itself, the snap, sits like this, all right? Which is, again, that's part of why you do a test piece. You get it down good, and get your stuff lined up perfectly, be used to the motion, be used to the action, do it right the first time, or practice the first time, and then do it right the second time. For this one, I wasn't quite sure, because the channel is too deep for the button bottom to sit flush with the anvil bottom, and so it would actually divot the leather against the outward ring of this. So I used the flat portion between the pieces. I figured, the center shaft of this seemed solid enough that I wasn't going to flatten the bottom side of the button out. There's a little bit of a bevel, if you'll see it, and that helps for the button to bite into the leather, so it's not the metal edges are not likely to scratch things around it. Same thing with this. You get your button lined up. This one's a little bit easier to do properly. It's less likely to be canted because both surfaces are flat here that are touching the leather. And again, same tool. You're going to go in there. This is how I like to do it. I wish that I had a good camera spot over by my vise. But this, right there, that's how I do that. Super easy. I'm actually balancing this on its bottom beam. That's how manageable this is, right? You get the tip into the center of the button shaft, tap, 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 tap. Again, 10, 15 hits. You want this to take a little while to seat because in the end run, you've got a ring on the inside of there. And if you squish the crap out of it and you mess it up and you have to take the button back out, you risk damaging your product because then you gotta drill that rivet ring out. Okay, cool. So, I showed you the garden shears. I have heavy duty cutters. I don't know if I have them out anymore. Scissors like these ones might work pretty okay. I mean, that's about normal. Grooved scissors are going to be a lot better. These are another alternative if you have to make a really long cut and you don't really care how straight it is. These work pretty okay. They do leave a rough edge, so you might have to do a little more work in the long run. Another option is just be very gentle, be very careful. I like to use a metal straight edge and a razor blade for long cuts, especially if they're going to be straight. The cork on the bottom of this kind of lifts the edge up too high. But if you run just the first 2 clicks on a blade like this, you can guide it along this straight edge, this metal straight edge, because it's beveled on both sides. You're not going to catch this, and you're going to be able to keep one of the straightest lines on a cut piece that you could possibly achieve doing it by hand, right? Otherwise, you could get a long blade and press punch, but I don't have money for that. Plus, razor blade works. What I'm going to show you now, done with all the other tools, the other stuff, the other fun stuff, I'm going to today use my hand tools to do this. Generally, I use metal punches, and that's actually what I laid this out with. I use metal punches and a hammer to do this, but there are so few holes here, and I need them to be wide enough already that I don't want to have to double punch. I don't want to have to, right, because I'll have to punch through this side, and then I have to punch through that side, and then I have to transfer these holes onto the holster, and then from the inside I have to punch these holes again. And using a forked punch that is roughly 3 inches long and a hammer, right, on the inside of this holster is not going to be very fun. So I can poke my holes, I can feel from the backside, I can get in there and waller these out just a little bit. And I think this is just going to be a little bit better of a tool to use for today. I don't know. Yeah, here we go. All right, so these are really nice, right? They're equally distant. So if I were to run a 4-hole versus a 2-hole, the points line up exactly. They're interchangeable, except one only punches 2 holes, one punches 4 holes. Laying out 3 bits in a 4-block pattern is pretty easy. If you punch your hole and you rotate the punch off of the second hole. This one here, actually, this comes off of a 4 run and it bevels in this way, and then I rotate it to here, and then I rotate it to there. And this is a 2, and then a 4. This one here and this one here actually don't connect via the punch. I'm only off by a tiny little bit, but that's fine. In the long run, I'm gonna stitch all the way around. It's gonna look pretty good. Good for laying stuff out. Unfortunately, when punching through this, I'm gonna have to get real creative. I'm already probably gonna use something like a cheater bar. Something like either of these two pipes, and I will stick it inside of the holster. I will wrap the pipe with leather, and then I will punch through that. If I can't punch it just directly in with, I want to call this an awl, hand awl, A-W-L. I can't Google it right now because my phone's up here, but I'll figure it out and I'll let you know. I want to call it a hand awl though. This one here, however, I might go ahead and just do with, yeah, let me see. Where do I want? Yeah, I'll do this with a hammer real quick for you. I want my first. Ooh, that's a bad idea. I'll do it here first. Okay. It's not going to be perfectly straight, but that's what happens when you don't lay things out. Do I want to do that? Yeah, I'll do that. Cool. Yeah, when you don't draw lines, when you don't lay things out, you don't draw lines, you don't lay things out, sometimes you just don't get the best result. But again, it doesn't have to be perfect to be great. Let's see if I can punch these back through from the other side. Cool. There we go. Then before I'm totally done, just come back through and give them a nice little widening. And you'll understand why I'm doing this in a little bit. This leather is pretty thick and it's very hard to get needles through without breaking the eyes clean off of them. I told y'all about my piece of tape. I actually had a bigger one. It had a lot more broken needles on it, but I finally safely wrapped other tape over it, wrapped it in duct tape, and then I disposed of it. You go through a lot of needles doing this though, and it's kind of obnoxious, I'm not gonna lie. Fortunately though, you can buy them by the bushel, if you like that term. I think that term's a cool term. What am I gonna do here? I'm just gonna poke all of these holes right here, just like this. Sorry, I'll try to give you a better angle of that. That's not worth it. All right, see all my holes there? Yeah, see, this is, depends on what you're doing and how many holes you gotta make, but sometimes this hand awl is a little bit faster, a little bit more easy to control, you know. It's that makes those holes pretty easy. I wish you could see straight through that. I don't know if you can pick the light up through this or not. All right, yeah, I could probably bore those out just a little tiny bit more. I bet I don't have a flashlight in here. I do. Hope you can see those holes there. Cool. Yeah, and then when I'm, ooh, yeah, that's a little bit thicker. I'm gonna punch these all the way through. See if I can prop this up a little bit for you. Ooh, yuck. Probably ought to do the rest of these from up here. I can see the holes because the light's bouncing off of their drywall here, and then the board's also light, so I'm just using the reflection of the light off of a light surface to see the holes through the dark backdrop, like little stars in a night sky. Makes it pretty easy. If I were blind or doing this in the dark, I would not be having a good time. Shout out to the blind homies. Hope y'all are doing okay. Gosh. And it looks like I done badgered a couple of these holes being too rough with this needle nose here, and got them a little rough at the surface. Just by scratching, you know, scratching the surrounding stuff. You don't have to stick the all the way through, not all the way through. Kind of generally just want to bore the hole out a little bit on both sides, and then leave the middle of it tight. Because over time it'll cinch back down on the thread or the fiber that you use to bind the whole thing, whether you call it stitching or sewing or whatever. The leather will, you know, shrink and tighten and do what it does as it ages, and maybe get a little loose, who knows. So you don't want them to, you don't want the holes to be so big that they can't keep friction over time. I'm gonna do these holes off camera because it's gonna be a lot of work. This video is probably getting pretty long already. Thanks for being here. I'm going to, I don't know, I might show you a little bit of stitching on this, but it takes so much effort and time to sew these by hand. And I mean, like, I'm literally like tugging the needle through with pliers half of the time. So I don't know how video conducive sewing is, and if I do it, it'll be a very low quality as far as like resolution is concerned. It'll be a low quality video, so maybe I'll end up doing that one a lot longer because the camera will be able to save, record, and like transfer that easier. Some of these bigger videos, the 22-minute one was like an hour and a half upload to YouTube, and the editing on the phone probably took 20 minutes or so to save, so it is a little bit time consuming. But if I can get some low resolution sewing in, I will share that with you as well. But thanks for being here, and I look forward to showing you some more. Thanks.